Hello again, college football fans. It's October 15th, 2023, and it is the Sunday after Week 7 in college football. Alabama's bowl eligible. I always like to remember that whenever we win our 6th game of the season, because we have to remember those times when we would have given anything for that 6th victory and a chance to get all those all-important bowl practices that we hear about these teams going into the next season, because it really counts going into your following season. And if you don't get those bowl practices, you're not going to be as far along as the rest of your competition. But anyway, Alabama 24, Arkansas 21. The fact that Alabama laid a little bit of an egg and didn't play their best game was not a surprise. I actually predicted that. I predicted that they would score 30. The surprising part was that the defense allowed 21 points to Arkansas, and it's not so much that it's surprising to me that our defense had a lapse there in the late in the third and early in the fourth quarter to allow that to happen, because it's like I mentioned going into this one, Alabama has been on a pretty rough stretch recently, but so is Arkansas, and I just felt like Arkansas wasn't going to have as much left in the tank as they did. But I sort of underestimate the fact that these teams, especially in the SEC West, and especially when they're having a bad season and most of their goals have already been taken off the table. Alabama's the Super Bowl. And I forget that they don't think about it the way I think about it, which is Alabama has looked very human the last couple of years. And but that doesn't matter to these teams. I mean, in the West, they've been abused by Alabama for the last decade and a half, and for the most part. And when they get a chance to play them, they're going to get as up for that game as any game they play. So I just underestimated that a little bit. And hats off to Arkansas for still, after losing 4 straight games, going on the road. Oh, boy, we've lost 4, and now we've got to go on the road to Bama. Isn't that great? But they didn't think about it that way. They fought with a lot of pride, and so I have to tip my cap to them a little bit. Obviously, the score prediction I gave was dead wrong. 30-10 Alabama victory. Close, like I said, Alabama's performance, especially on offense, wasn't that big of a surprise. That Arkansas O-line just was able to muster more than I thought they would be able to in this one. And, Alabama's offense is just... it's really getting to that point now in the season where talking about them improving, I think, is a little bit silly at this point. We've got one more game coming up before the bye week, and we're getting down to the last stretch of the season. So I'm almost ready to just call Alabama's offense what it is, which is a team with a pretty good quarterback, a young, improving quarterback, an improved group of wide receivers this year. I do think that is up from last year, our production out of that spot. But more of the same out of the offensive line and the running backs. And I think I'm just gonna put it more on the offensive line now. If it was one thing they did wrong, if it was just the running game, I think I could put all of the onus on the running backs. But the fact that this O-line has problems playing consistently, doing anything. I mean, they have problems pass protecting consistently. They have problems not jumping off sides consistently. And, of course, they have problems with the running game. Now, I did say going into this one that I felt like the running game was going to produce more. They had nowhere else to go from last week than up. And they did. They had one of their best games. I think maybe their second best rushing, as far as numbers go, game of the year with 177 yards. And none of those came from Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe got sacked enough that he had negative rushing yards. So that was all coming from the running backs. And they did use Jam Miller and Justice Haynes a lot more in this game than they have so far this season. And when our running game was looking really good in this ball game, which it did look probably as good, if not better, than it has all season in the second and early third quarter of this ball game, and that was when they were running all 4 guys. Everybody was getting touches. Roydell ripped off probably the best run of the game. Jace looked good again. Not great, but good. And then Jam Miller probably got more carries than Justice Haynes, but they both got a couple of carries, and Jam Miller had a couple of really good-looking runs. One in particular where he got some speed off the edge, which I felt like he looked a little bit faster than what I've seen out of Roydell or Jace McClellan all season. And he's a little bit bigger too, so I'm going to continue my sermons every week about wanting to see more of those younger running backs, because I just feel like they're more explosive and have a higher upside than the two older ones that we have. And I'll continue to talk about that, because that's something that Nick Saban has been guilty of in the past. I'm not going to get into that right now, but just suffice to say, as far as the offense goes, one of the big problems, they've done their best work throughout the entire season in the second and third quarters of the games. I feel like they have a problem being clutch. The clutch times in the ball game, especially for the offense, is going to be the first couple of drives in a game, because getting that early lead, getting an early command of a football game is so paramount in these ball games, and they've not been able to do that all year long. And like I said, they sort of turned it on in the second and the third quarters, and then when the fourth quarter, especially towards the end, they seem to just sort of go dormant again. And I think it all goes back mostly to the offensive line. That's when they start giving up those sacks. That's when they aren't able to pave the road for the running backs the way we want them to be able to do. So just once again, I mean, it's the same old broken record, but our offensive line has not been able to improve enough and play consistently at a high level enough for me to be confident that we're going to get to a point where we're going to be able to go where we want to go this season with this ball team. And the clock is about to strike midnight on all that, as far as I'm concerned. Arkansas, talking about them going forward, they had a real tough draw this season. Everybody knew that when we looked at their schedule going in. I mean, those road games are not playing at home. I mean, they haven't been at home a win since BYU. I think that was a home game for them. And Sam Pittman's really got to be kicking himself for letting that game go now that what has happened. But, I mean, having to go on the road to LSU, Alabama, Ole Miss, and play Texas A&M not in your home stadium, boy, I tell you what. And it's gone about as badly as it could. I mean, at this point, looking at Sam Pittman in his post-game interview, he had sort of that 1,000-yard stare. And that's the first time I've really seen that out of him. He was still in high spirits even coming into this one. But all these close losses to teams that, really you were picked to do worse than you did in the game, to get that tantalizingly close that many times and coming up short that many times, that's got to be very discouraging. And, this could be a crossroads for Sam Pittman's tenure at Arkansas. If he's able to regroup and get this team to continue to play above their heads, they can win a lot of their games. I think they can win enough games to actually become bowl eligible. They've got 5 games left, and they got to win 4 of them. There's a couple in there that look easier than others, but, we'll just have to see on that. It's like I said, if Sam Pittman lets this team and this season sort of just go completely down the drain, that could be I don't think that he'll be on a hot seat. I don't think he'll be fired no matter what happens this season. Discussions will be had if he loses every game, but he's not going to lose every game that's left on his schedule. I just don't see any realistic possibility for that happening. But like I said, this if he can pull them out of the pit and get them into a bowl game, then he'll have a lot of confidence from the higher level people at Arkansas going into next season. But if it goes down the drain, the questions are going to start, and the groans out of the fan base are going to begin. We all know how that happens in the SEC, so that'll be an interesting little side note to look at for the rest of this season in the SEC. Now, talking about the SEC around the entire league, my perception changed this week a little bit. regarding a couple of things, really out of the East and the West. And now I still think that Georgia has a firmer grip on the East than Alabama does on the West, but Missouri could be a problem. Georgia had some tough time with them last year. I know it was in their place, and they get them between the hedges this year, but that's something to keep an eye out on. And, Georgia, I still feel like Georgia, when they feel like they have a reason to get out of bed and get dressed and take a shower and give their best, they are one of the best, if not the best team in the country. They showed that against Kentucky. Vanderbilt is just never going to inspire an elite team, a top-level team that has been at the top of the mountain as long as Georgia has now, to really want to get out of bed and give their best. And, you saw that in that game that they had against Vanderbilt this week. They just wanted to go get their win and get out of town. I don't think that Brock Bowers' injury is as serious as the media is letting on at this point, but that's definitely something to keep an eye out for. And this is a couple of weeks in a row now that he's been knocked around a little bit. And, sometimes when that happens, third time's a charm. Nobody wants to see that happen, but just like I said, it's something to keep an eye out for. I already spoke about, it may be time to just call Bama's O-line what it is, which is just not all that great. Not bad, but definitely one of the lower units that Nick Saban has had. And the more worrisome part is it's been an ongoing problem now for 3 years. So that's through 2 coaches now. I looked it up, but we'll have plenty of more time to comb through that with it as finely as possible as the season wears on. But one reason that my perception has changed about the West is LSU. I mentioned in the last video I did, that the Auburn-LSU game was going to be very interesting for me as an Alabama fan to see who I should be more scared of. Well, it's pretty clear who I should be more scared of. And, I had kept up a healthy fear of Jayden Daniels and mentioned that a few times in some of my videos leading up to this. But now I am 100% stone cold petrified of that guy and that entire offense. Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, and don't forget the tight end Mason Taylor, who's probably, outside of Brock Bowers, has an argument for being one of the best tight ends in the league, and they're really humming right now. In the last video I mentioned something about the Florida State game. Florida State was able to shut them down in the second half. Well, first of all, that was the first game of the season, and it's so long ago now, I don't even really think it's worth mentioning, because this LSU offense is in a place where it hasn't been since Joe Burrow left, and it's so terrifying to say that. Yeah, they lost to Florida State, but Florida State might be the best team in the country. They've got an argument. I'll get into my top 4 later, but I've had them at number 1 the last couple of weeks. They, at no time last year and really early in the season were those receivers just going off the way they've been going off. And so I think and I hope that the national media will catch on, because leading up to that game, we're going to need as much negative press coming our way at Alabama as we can get, and as much good press going to LSU. People need to clue in. I think this might be the best offense in the country. It's certainly the scariest looking one to me, the most dangerous one. I got a good look at Michael Penix this week. He looks good, but he does not scare me nearly as much as Jayden Daniels does. And he's the kind of guy, and especially with receivers like he's got, and the running game. I mean, I looked at the numbers. They've got the second best running game numbers-wise in the conference behind Tennessee. So, their running game is better than ours. Their passing game and quarterback play is the best in the country, in my opinion. I mean, the level that guy can run and throw, he's the kind of guy, and we've mentioned it a lot, that gives Nick Saban nightmares. And we're talking about Nick Saban's vintage, great, best defenses that finished the year, top 5 in everything, national championships, all that kind of stuff. These are the kind of guys that really keeps him up at night, and therefore they keep me up at night. And so I'm real good and terrified about that LSU game now. And I'll just say it right here and now. Obviously, you know, it's still a couple of weeks away. We've got a bye week. We've got a game against Tennessee coming up before that. But I am certainly looking ahead. I know that the coaches and the players can afford to look ahead. I'm looking ahead. Because the thing about it is, if Tennessee beats us, who cares about anything anyway? Because I don't think they're a great football team. And if they're able to beat us, then I don't think there's much hope of us reaching any of our goals that we want to reach. But I will say, in this video right here and now, if LSU is on, Alabama's going to have to play a better game than they've played all season, probably in the last 2 seasons. They're going to have to play, the last time I saw Alabama play the way they would need to play if LSU's offense is on. They'll have to play the way they did against Georgia in that SEC championship game in 2021. And I don't know if they have it in them. But, you know, we'll have more time to talk about that. Now, all that praise and all that being said about LSU, I will have to say this. I think I might have been giving Auburn a little bit too much credit in this Hugh Freeze first season. The fact that Hugh Freeze got those 2 straight victories over Alabama when he was at the Ole Miss helm, I think fed into that, and just Auburn in general, and knowing that we have to go to Jordan-Hare this year. No matter what Auburn does, I'm going to be terrified of Jordan-Hare. That's just the way that is, being a part of this rivalry the way that I have been throughout my life. But I will say that I was giving them a little bit too much credit. I think I was giving Auburn's defense a little bit too much credit. But having said that, their strategy seemed to be different than the strategy that they had against Georgia and Texas A&M. And I don't know why that is, because they played a lot of zone and a lot of just rushing 4 guys. And those 4 guys against Jaden Daniels were not able to give him a lot of pressure. And you give that guy time, he will kill you, especially with his receivers playing the way they've been playing. And I think in that sort of situation, I understand why they like to play that sort of prevent style defense against an offense that's scary. Just keep it in front of you, and maybe we'll be able to come up with something in the red zone. He's too good. He's too good to let get in the red zone. What you got to do is you got to bring the house. You got to put as much pressure on him every play as you possibly can. And if he burns you, he burns you. But if you give him time, he's going to burn you. And with his legs, the way he's got it going right now, and with the rest of that offense, the running game and the receivers and the tight end and everything playing the way they're playing, you don't want to let them get into the red zone, because the chances that they're not going to get a touchdown are pretty low. So I just felt like Auburn had the exact wrong game plan in that one. And that'll be something to look at the rest of their season. How are they going to play defense against other teams? It might have just been fear. Auburn looked like a scared team. They looked like they were being coached by a scared coaching staff. And they had plenty of reasons to be scared, as you saw as that game went ahead. And hopefully we will gird our loins and have enough bravery going into that game not to look as hapless as Auburn did. But rest of the West, I don't have faith in Ole Miss winning out. They've still got to go to Georgia, and they've got a lot of tough games left on their schedule. And they're Ole Miss. They just have a way of wilting as the season goes on. And I know, as I'm talking about being so afraid of LSU, people are going to go back to how we played against Ole Miss and then how Ole Miss played against LSU. You know, we just I think we got Kiffin on a good week, and LSU got Kiffin on a bad week, and that's all I'm going to say about that right now. But I don't think Ole Miss is going to be able to win out, so I feel like they're out of the West, and I feel like it's kind of boiling down to LSU, Alabama, and that's pretty much been, more times than not, that has been the situation since Nick Saban has been at Alabama. It's come down to that game for the West, and it looks like we're getting more of that this year. Talked about Georgia already. Missouri's definitely going to be a problem for them. One thing to mention, that was a sneaky big win for Florida and Billy Napier in South Carolina this weekend, and I want to go ahead and mention that because I'm still on the fence about Billy Napier. He might wind up being the savior for Florida, or they might just be absolute garbage. I'm not ready to make a determination on that one way or the other. But now, since we're talking about the East, obviously Alabama's got their first game with an Eastern Division opponent this year coming up, the third Saturday in October against Tennessee. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. The only thing that really scares me in this game, there's one thing that kind of scares me. I'll get into that, but the one thing that really scares me in this game against Tennessee versus Alabama is Alabama. Alabama has the capacity, as we've seen, to make enough mistakes, especially because of the offensive line. And going back to that Arkansas game, they did clean up a lot of those false start penalties, but in the end, when things started to get tense, back to that clutch thing, that's when that started showing up again. There was a couple of false start penalties late. They got a false start penalty in the victory formation. You don't even really have to run a real play. You don't really have to block. All you have to do is get set and snap the ball and go home. And they weren't able to do that. And that kind of stuff, I'm telling you, especially if you're talking about a dangerous team like LSU, you cannot let things like that happen. But back to the Tennessee game. The other thing that scares me about Tennessee, sort of, is you look up and yet another top 5 SEC pass rush is coming to town. But we're getting kind of used to that, and I mentioned a couple of videos ago, that's something that hasn't bothered me so much this season. Yeah, it's been a problem, but we've been able to overcome it pretty well. Those sacks. So I'm expecting to see Milroe get sacked again, and hopefully he'll be able to continue to offset that with the long passing game, which has been really the only good thing that we've been able to do consistently offensively this year. And, that's not something that you want to hang your hat on. But it's worked so far to keep us where we're at, which is still the only undefeated conference record in the SEC West, and that's where we want to be. But Tennessee's offense, they're just not scary. Yes, they are leading the conference in rushing, but I don't think we're going to shut their rushing game down, but they're not going to have the kind of numbers against us, even against Texas A&M, I don't think. Texas A&M was a pretty dejected, tired-looking team. And I feel like they had gone just about as far as they could go with Max Johnson. I said last week, leading up to the Alabama-Texas A&M game, that I just didn't find him all that frightening, and I feel like that the league is catching on to that, and they're gonna force him to win games for Texas A&M, and I don't know if he's going to be able to do it too many times. But as far as being a Bama fan and expectations, I've kept it at this all year long. I'm not ready to start talking about Alabama's college football playoff chances. We just want to win the West. We want to beat Auburn for the 4th straight year, which we haven't done since Bear Bryant was coach. And I think that is a really responsible place to keep your expectations if you're an Alabama fan, because you might be setting yourself up for disappointment this season. The good news about LSU, even if we lose that ball game, they've still got some work to do against Florida and Texas A&M. But unfortunately, both of those games are going to be in Baton Rouge. So, a lot remains to be seen coming out of the SEC West and the SEC East, for that matter. Because if Missouri can beat Georgia, guess what? They're in the driver's seat in the SEC West. Now, that's a long way to go before thinking something like that could happen. But really, if you went into this season, in preseason, going into this season, thinking that was a possibility, it was probably a long shot in most people's imagination going into this season. Now, back to the rest of college football around the country. I've been doing a top 4 for the last couple of review videos, and I've got another one this week. It's changed up a little bit. There's a new participant, because I feel like I just made a mistake kind of overlooking this team last week. Number 1, I've still got Florida State. I still think that their wins over Clemson and LSU are just about as impressive a pair of victories. Now, there are some more impressive victories, single wins, which includes one of the participants in this top 4. Number 2, I have moved up Ohio State. They look like they're really rounding into form, And if their quarterback can play the way he played in that last drive against Notre Dame, and their receivers can start playing up to their potential, Ohio State's going to be a real hard out. And I don't see them, unless they get into the postseason deep, I don't see too many really dynamic offenses on their horizon. Say what you will about Michigan, I don't think that they are one of those scary kind of offenses. They've looked scary mainly because of the competition that they've had served up to them this year. So I'm not going to get too excited about them. But Ohio State's got at least one really impressive victory that looks more impressive now after Notre Dame beat Southern California. So that's why I have them at number 2. Number 3, I got Georgia. And after seeing what they did, how they were able to hold on against an Auburn team in the toughest place in America, and they were really giving them their best, and then what they did against Kentucky, and they just had to roll out of bed and beat Vanderbilt, and that's what they did. So, considering that they're the 2 straight national championship winner, and they still haven't been beaten, and they still haven't been really tested. I mean, a 7-point win against Auburn, you could say that that's, a thriller, I guess. But it felt like once Brock Bowers got that go-ahead touchdown, everybody in the world knew that Georgia had secured that. And so it's not like it came down to a walk-off touchdown or anything like that. So and like we always say, getting tested and being able to get through it is a good thing for teams. It's never a bad thing. So say what you will about Georgia. Yes, they haven't had a tough schedule, but it has been tougher than Michigan's, and that's why at number 4 I have Oklahoma. I feel like I may have sort of overlooked them a little bit last week, but their victory over Texas definitely gives them way more cachet in my mind than Michigan. Michigan might be the best team in the country, but who would know, because of that just pathetic, laughable schedule that entire program should be embarrassed about. So I slid them in last week because I feel like I overlooked Oklahoma. I'm not overlooking them this week. And as far as Washington, Oregon, if either one of those teams had really asserted themselves in that game and won comfortably, or at least won less thrillingly than having to rely on a missed field goal to win there at the very end, I would have probably slid them in there. But who knows if that was a classic game among great teams, or if it was just a toss-up game against evenly matched teams that are, going to prove themselves to be, not as elite as everyone thinks as the season wears on. We don't know. But what we do know is that Oklahoma had a very impressive victory over Texas at the Texas State Fair. And so that's why we're going to slide them into number 4 right now. And that's where we are in college football right now. It is still wide open. There are still a lot of undefeated teams on the slate. A lot of that's going to work itself out because they're in the same conference. Mainly what I'm thinking about is in the Big Ten with Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. Ohio State plays Penn State next week. That's going to be a real interesting game to keep your eye on. But as far as Alabama goes, let's not worry about that kind of stuff. Let's just keep winning our games, and let's find a way to get to Atlanta and get a shot at Georgia. Thanks for watching.